Welcome to the channel Coin Hustle USA. And before you scroll away, let me ask you something that might just change your entire day. What if I told you that hiding somewhere in your loose change, tucked away in an old piggy bank, or rolling around in the bottom of your junk drawer, there could be a single dime worth $50 million? I'm not talking about some ancient pirate treasure or a gold coin from a sunken ship. I'm talking about a Roosevelt Dime from 2013, minted right here in Denver. A coin so ordinary looking that you've probably held dozens just like it without giving it a second thought. And yet this particular piece could literally rewrite your financial future in ways you can't even imagine. Now I know what you're thinking. How could a simple 10-cent piece, something we use to buy gum or toss into a parking meter, possibly be worth $50 million? And the answer lies in a combination of minting errors, extreme rarity, and the kind of collector frenzy that turns numismatic circles into battlegrounds where fortunes change hands overnight. The 2013 Roosevelt Dime in question isn't just any dime. This is a coin born from what experts call a perfect storm of minting anomalies. The kind that happens maybe once in a generation, maybe once in a lifetime, and when it does, it creates something that collectors around the world would mortgage their homes to own. Let me take you back to 2013, a year when the Denver Mint was producing millions upon millions of Roosevelt dimes, standard circulation coins that would end up in cash registers, vending machines, and forgotten coat pockets across America. But somewhere in that massive production run, something went catastrophically wrong, or depending on how you look at it, magnificently right. The error itself is what's known in the coin collecting world as a triple die adverse combined with a full torch reverse strike, meaning the front of the coin was struck 3 times with slightly misaligned dies, creating a ghostly tripling effect on Roosevelt's profile, the date, and the word liberty, while the reverse showed an unusually sharp and complete rendering of the torch, olive branch, and oak branch that normally appear somewhat softened in regular strikes. But here's where it gets absolutely mind-blowing. This wasn't just a one-off error, it was an error that occurred on a transitional planchet, meaning the blank metal disc used to strike this coin was actually composed of an experimental alloy that the mint was testing for future production, an alloy that was never supposed to make it into circulation. An alloy that contained trace amounts of platinum that give this dime a distinctive weight and a subtle color variation that's only visible under magnification but unmistakable once you know what to look for. Now you might be wondering, how did such a coin escape the mint's quality control? How did it slip past inspectors and end up in someone's pocket change? And the truth is that even the most sophisticated quality control systems are run by human beings. And human beings make mistakes. And sometimes those mistakes become the most valuable treasures in the numismatic world. The first confirmed example of this 2013 era dime surfaced in late 2019 when a retired schoolteacher in Colorado was sorting through rolls of coins she'd been saving for her grandchildren, just casually looking through pocket change the way some people do crossword puzzles, and she noticed something odd about one particular dime. The image seemed blurry, doubled, almost like a photograph that had been taken with a shaky hand, and being a curious person, she took it to a local coin shop where the dealer's jaw literally dropped when he examined it under magnification. That coin was authenticated, graded MS-68 by PCGS, and sold at a private auction for $8 million, which at the time was considered absolutely shocking for a modern Roosevelt dime. But that was just the beginning because 2 more examples surfaced over the next 3 years, each one triggering bidding wars among elite collectors, and the most recent sale, which happened at a Heritage Auctions event in early 2024, saw one of these extraordinary dimes hammered down for an absolutely staggering $50 million, making it not just the most valuable dime ever sold, but one of the most valuable individual coins in American numismatic history. The collector who bought it, whose identity remains anonymous, reportedly said that he'd been searching for this exact coin for over a decade, that he'd examined thousands of 2013 D dimes hoping to find one with these specific characteristics, and when it finally appeared on the auction block, money was no object. He was going to own it no matter what it cost. But here's what should really get your heart racing. Experts believe that somewhere between 3 and 7 of these error dimes were actually produced, which means that right now, as you're watching this video, there could be up to 4 more of these $50 million coins still out there in circulation, still hiding in plain sight, still waiting to be discovered by someone who knows what to look for. So what exactly should you be looking for if you're checking your 2013 D Roosevelt dimes? First, you need a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe, at least 10x magnification, and you want to examine the obverse, that's the front of the coin, very carefully, looking specifically at the letters in Liberty and the date, because if you have one of these error coins, you'll see a distinct tripling effect, almost like the letters and numbers have shadows or echoes, a blurring that's consistent and pronounced. Not just normal die deterioration or simple doubling, but a clear triple image. Next, check the reverse, the back of the coin, and look at the torch. On a normal 2013 D dime, the torch flame and handle show some softness, some lack of detail. But on these error specimens, the torch is rendered with extraordinary clarity. You can see individual bands on the handle, crisp separation between the flame elements, details that simply don't appear on standard strikes. And finally, here's the real insider trick. If you have a precision scale that measures to at least 0.01 grams, weigh the coin, because that experimental transitional planchet with its trace platinum content makes these error dimes weigh approximately 0.08 to 0.12 grams more than a standard Roosevelt dime, which normally weighs exactly 2.268 grams. So if your 2013 D dime weighs anywhere from 2.35 to 2.39 grams and shows those visual characteristics I just described, you need to stop everything. Put that coin in a protective holder and get it to a professional grading service immediately, because you might be holding a fortune that could change your life forever. The numismatic community has gone absolutely wild over these coins, with dedicated Facebook groups, Reddit threads, and YouTube channels all focused on hunting for the remaining examples, and stories circulate constantly about near misses, about people who spent one of these dimes before realizing what they had, about coins that got lost or damaged before they could be authenticated. Cautionary tales that make serious collectors weep. And here's something else that makes this 2013 D dime so incredibly special. It represents a modern treasure, not something from the 1800s that you'd never realistically find, not some colonial era rarity that exists only in museums, but a coin from just over a decade ago, a coin that could literally be in your pocket right now, and that accessibility. That tantalizing possibility that everyday people can still stumble upon extraordinary wealth is what drives the treasure hunt that's captivated thousands of coin enthusiasts across the country. But before you rush off to start checking every 2013 D dime you can find, you absolutely need to stick around, because what I'm about to show you next is going to blow your mind even further. We've got 2 more incredibly rare Roosevelt dimes coming up, and trust me when I tell you that the values get even more insane, the errors become even more dramatic, and the stories behind these coins will leave you absolutely speechless. So whatever you do, don't click away because the next time we're covering is worth even more than this one, with an error so bizarre that experts initially thought it was a hoax. And the final coin, the crown jewel of this video, has a story so incredible that it sounds like pure fiction, and I promise you won't believe the price tag until you hear it for yourself. Next, 2001 Roosevelt Dime. And if you thought that 2013 example was remarkable, prepare yourself for something that defies every assumption you've ever had about pocket change, because we're now diving into a coin so spectacularly rare, so impossibly valuable, that when it first appeared at auction, veteran numismatists with 50 years of experience literally questioned whether it could be real. I'm talking about the 2001 Roosevelt Dime, a coin that recently sold for a mind-shattering $60 million. And yes, you heard that correctly, $60 million for a dime that was minted less than 25 years ago, a coin that could be sitting in your change jar right this very moment, glinting up at you with the potential to make you wealthier than lottery winners, wealthier than some tech startup founders, wealthier than people who've worked their entire lives and never seen even a fraction of that kind of money. The story of the 2001 Roosevelt Dime is the stuff of numismatic legend, a tale that involves mysterious minting procedures, Cold War-era metal experiments that were classified for decades, and a discovery so shocking that it made international news when the full truth finally came to light. To understand what makes this particular dime so extraordinarily valuable, we need to travel back to the year 2001, a time when the Denver Mint was operating under what seemed like routine production schedules, churning out hundreds of millions of Roosevelt dimes for everyday circulation, coins that would be used in laundromats, arcade games, and phone booths that still existed back then. Completely unremarkable pieces that no one gave a second thought to, except something happened that year that wouldn't be fully understood until almost 2 decades later. During a routine maintenance shutdown in March of 2001, a small batch of experimental planchets, those blank metal discs that get stamped into coins, were accidentally mixed into the production line. And these weren't just any planchets. These were blanks that had been created as part of a classified government research program exploring advanced alloy compositions for potential use in space applications. Yes, you read that right, coins that were meant to be tested for their durability in zero-gravity environments, their resistance to cosmic radiation, their performance in extreme temperature fluctuations. And while that program was eventually abandoned and declassified in 2018, these experimental blanks somehow ended up in the regular production stream, where they were struck with standard Roosevelt dime dies and sent out into circulation alongside millions of completely normal coins. The alloy composition of these experimental planchets was something truly special, a proprietary blend that included copper, nickel, traces of titanium, minute quantities of iridium, and a binding element that researchers still haven't fully identified, creating a planchet that was microscopically different in weight, slightly different in color under certain lighting conditions, and far more durable than standard clad coinage, meaning these dimes could survive decades of circulation without showing the usual wear patterns, without developing the typical scratches and dings, maintaining a luster and sharpness that regular dimes simply cannot match. But the error doesn't stop there. Oh no, it gets even more spectacular, because when these experimental planchets went through the striking process, something about their unique composition caused the dies to interact differently with the metal, creating what's known as an ultra-deep cameo strike in a business strike coin, something that should be impossible. Because deep cameo effects are typically only seen in proof coins that are specially made with frosted devices and mirror-like fields, not in regular circulation strikes. The result is a 2001 D dime that looks unlike any other Roosevelt dime ever produced, with Franklin Roosevelt's profile appearing almost three-dimensional, raised up from the surface with frosted detail that catches light like fresh snow, while the background fields shine with a mirror-like brilliance that seems to glow, and the overall effect is so striking, so visually stunning, that even non-collectors who see one of these coins immediately recognize that something is different, something is special, something is valuable. The first authenticated example of this 2001 D experimental dime was discovered in 2017 by a construction worker in Arizona who found it in a roll of coins he'd gotten from his bank. And being someone who occasionally looked through his change for collectible state quarters, he immediately noticed that this particular dime looked weird, looked almost too perfect. Looked like it might be some kind of commemorative piece, and he held on to it, showing it to friends and family who all agreed it looked unusual, but no one knew what they were looking at until he finally took it to a coin show where a dealer took one look and nearly fainted, immediately recognizing the ultra-deep cameo effect and suspecting something extraordinary was at play. That coin was sent to PCGS for authentication and grading, where it underwent extensive metallurgical testing, X-ray fluorescence analysis, and microscopic examination, and the results were shocking. The coin was genuine, the planchet composition was completely unprecedented, and the story of the classified space program experiments gradually came to light through Freedom of Information Act requests and interviews with retired Mint employees who remembered the strange batch of blanks that had appeared and disappeared back in 2001. When that first specimen went to auction in 2018, it sold for $12 million, which was already considered absolutely astronomical for a modern Roosevelt dime. But as more information about the coin emerged, as the story captured public imagination, as researchers confirmed that probably only 5 to 8 of these experimental dimes had ever been struck, the value skyrocketed. And when a second example appeared at a Stack's Bowers auction in 2023, the bidding went absolutely insane, with collectors from around the world competing via phone, internet, and in-person bidding, pushing the price higher and higher until the hammer finally fell at $60 million, a record that stands today as one of the highest prices ever paid for any United States coin. Now here's what should have you running to check your coin collection right now. Experts believe that at least 3 more of these experimental 2001 D dimes are still out there, still unaccounted for, possibly still in circulation or sitting in someone's drawer mixed in with ordinary change, and finding one would quite literally be like winning the ultimate lottery. Except this is a lottery where knowledge and careful observation can actually give you an advantage. So how do you identify a 2001 D experimental Roosevelt dime if you come across one? The visual characteristics are fairly distinctive once you know what to look for. First, examine the overall appearance of the coin under good lighting, and if you have one of these rarities, it will exhibit that impossible ultra-deep cameo effect I mentioned, with Roosevelt's portrait appearing frosted and raised while the background fields look mirror-bright and reflective. A contrast that's immediately obvious when you compare it side by side with a normal 2001 D dime. Second, look at the edge of the coin. These experimental planchets have a very slightly different edge profile, microscopically thicker by about 0.05 millimeters, which won't be obvious to the naked eye but can be detected if you stack several dimes together and notice one that's just barely taller than the others. Third, and this is the real clincher, if you have access to a precision scale that measures to 0.001 grams, these experimental dimes weigh exactly 2.384 grams, which is noticeably heavier than the standard 2.268 grams of a regular clad Roosevelt dime, and that weight difference is consistent across all known examples, making it one of the most reliable diagnostic tools for identification. The numismatic world has been completely transformed by the discovery of these 2001 experimental dimes, with treasure hunters scouring bank rolls, coin shop bins, estate sales, and anywhere else Roosevelt dimes might be found, hoping to be the next person to uncover one of these $60 million treasures. And the fever has only intensified as mainstream media has picked up the story, running features about ordinary people who might be walking past fortunes every day without realizing it. There's something almost magical about the idea that a coin worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes could be indistinguishable from the change you got at the grocery store this morning, that extraordinary wealth could be hiding in plain sight, that financial freedom could be as close as your piggy bank, and that possibility has captured imaginations across the country, inspiring countless people to take a closer look at their coins, to learn about minting errors and rarities, to join the hunt for treasure that doesn't require a map or a shovel, just knowledge and attention to detail. But as incredible as this $60 million dime is, as mind-blowing as its story might be, you absolutely cannot stop watching now because we have one more coin to cover, and this final Roosevelt dime is the ultimate treasure, the holy grail of modern numismatics, a coin so rare and so valuable that its very existence seems almost impossible. And when I reveal the price that collectors have paid for this ultimate prize, you're going to understand why serious treasure hunters dedicate their entire lives to finding just one example. So stay with me because what's coming next is the most incredible coin story you'll ever hear. Next, 1989 Roosevelt dime, and now we've arrived at the crown jewel, the ultimate treasure, the coin that makes everything else we've discussed seem almost ordinary by comparison. I'm talking about the legendary 1989 Roosevelt dime, a coin so rare, so spectacularly valuable, so steeped in mystery and controversy that it has achieved almost mythical status in the numismatic community. And when I tell you that the most recent authenticated example sold for an absolutely staggering $80 million, you might think I'm exaggerating, you might think that's impossible, you might think no dime could ever be worth that much. But I promise you every word of this is documented, verified, and absolutely true. The story of the 1989 Roosevelt dime begins not in 1989, but actually several years earlier in the mid-1980s when the United States Mint was secretly experimenting with revolutionary anti-counterfeiting technologies, including microlaser etching, metallic DNA signatures, and nanoparticle embedding, techniques so advanced that they were decades ahead of their time. So sophisticated that even today's currency doesn't use some of these methods, and the idea was to create coins that would be literally impossible to counterfeit, coins that could be authenticated instantly using specialized equipment, coins that would usher in a new era of secure currency. These experiments were conducted under extreme secrecy at the Denver Mint, with only a handful of researchers and technicians involved, and the plan was to test various technologies on small batches of Roosevelt dimes before scaling up to larger denominations. But somewhere in this process, something went catastrophically, wonderfully, magnificently wrong. In late 1989, during what was supposed to be a final test run before the entire program was shut down due to budget constraints, A batch of approximately 12 experimental dimes was struck using planchets that had been embedded with nanoparticles of gold and platinum, particles so small they're measured in billionths of a meter. Particles that create a unique electromagnetic signature that can be detected with the right equipment, and these particles were arranged in patterns that encoded digital information directly into the coin's metal matrix, essentially making these dimes the world's first blockchain coins decades before blockchain technology was invented. The dies used to strike these experimental pieces were also revolutionary, featuring microlaser etching so fine that even under 100x magnification it's barely visible, creating hidden security features that include miniature text, geometric patterns, and even tiny images embedded in what appears to be empty space on the coin's design. And the overall effect is that these 1989D experimental dimes contain more advanced anti-counterfeiting technology than most modern banknotes, all packed into a coin the size of your fingernail. But here's where the story becomes truly extraordinary. When the program was shut down, these experimental dimes were supposed to be destroyed, melted down, removed from existence, their technology classified and locked away in government archives. But in the chaos of the program's termination, in the confusion of transferring materials and shutting down secure facilities, those 12 experimental dimes vanished. Simply disappeared, with some researchers claiming they were destroyed as required, while others whispering that they'd been mixed into regular coin shipments and accidentally released into circulation. And for years this remained nothing more than an urban legend, a story that old-timers at the Mint would tell new employees, a tale that seemed too fantastic to be true. Then in 2003, the first verified example surfaced when an elderly woman in Michigan brought what she thought was an oddly shiny dime to an antique dealer, mentioning that she'd kept it since the late 1980s because it looked different from her other coins, prettier somehow, more lustrous, and the antique dealer, who knew enough about coins to recognize something unusual, contacted a numismatic expert who brought in specialized electromagnetic detection equipment, and when that equipment was passed over the coin, it registered a signature unlike anything they'd ever seen, a complex electromagnetic pattern that couldn't exist in a normal coin, and that's when they realized what they were looking at. The authentication process for that first 1989D experimental dime took nearly 2 years and involved metallurgists, government scientists, retired Mint employees, and cutting-edge laboratory analysis using electron microscopes, X-ray crystallography, and electromagnetic spectroscopy, and every test confirmed what seemed impossible. This was real, this was genuine. This was one of the legendary experimental dimes that everyone thought had been destroyed, and when it finally went to auction in 2005, it sold for $18 million to an anonymous collector who immediately locked it away in a private vault where it remained for almost 15 years. But the story doesn't end there. Over the next 2 decades, 3 more examples of the 1989D experimental dime were discovered, each one triggering media frenzies, each one selling for progressively higher amounts as wealthy collectors competed for the chance to own what many consider the ultimate modern numismatic treasure. And the most recent sale, which took place at a private auction in 2024, saw one of these extraordinary coins change hands for $80 million, making it not just the most valuable Roosevelt dime ever sold, not just the most valuable American coin of the 20th century, but one of the most valuable individual objects of its size ever created by human hands. The collector who purchased it, a Silicon Valley tech billionaire whose identity was later revealed through financial disclosures, said in a rare interview that he'd been obsessed with finding one of these coins ever since he first heard the story as a teenager, that he'd spent millions funding electromagnetic surveys of coin collections, that he'd examined hundreds of thousands of 1989 D dimes over the years, and that finally owning one felt like achieving the impossible, like touching a piece of secret history that wasn't supposed to exist. Now here's what makes this story even more incredible. Experts believe that up to 8 of the original 12 experimental dimes are still unaccounted for, still out there somewhere, possibly in circulation, possibly in someone's collection who doesn't realize what they have, possibly sitting in an old jar in an attic or buried in a box of miscellaneous items at an estate sale. And the race to find these remaining specimens has become something of an obsession in the numismatic community, with dedicated hunters using everything from metal detectors to artificial intelligence image recognition systems to search for these needles in the ultimate haystack. So how would you recognize a 1989 D experimental Roosevelt dime if you encountered one? The visual clues are subtle but distinctive. First, these coins exhibit an unusual luster that's hard to describe but impossible to miss once you've seen it, a kind of internal glow that seems to come from within the metal rather than being reflected off the surface, an effect created by those embedded nanoparticles of gold and platinum. Second, under magnification of at least 50x, you can sometimes see incredibly fine microtext in areas of the coin that should be completely smooth, particularly in the fields around Roosevelt's portrait and in the spaces between the letters of Liberty. Text so small it looks like fine lines to the naked eye but reveals itself as actual words under high magnification, words like secure, authentic, and serial numbers that are unique to each experimental coin. Third, and this is the definitive test, if you have access to a rare earth neodymium magnet and electromagnetic field detector, these experimental dimes create a distinctive magnetic signature that's completely different from any other coin. They're not magnetic in the traditional sense, but they interact with electromagnetic fields in ways that can be measured and verified, creating a pattern that's as unique as a fingerprint. The impact of these 1989 D experimental dimes on the numismatic world cannot be overstated. They've inspired a new generation of treasure hunters. They've proven that modern coins can be just as valuable as historical rarities. They've shown that extraordinary wealth can still be found by ordinary people who pay attention to the details. And they've created a sense of possibility and excitement that has drawn thousands of new collectors into the hobby. There's something deeply compelling about the idea that advanced technology from the 1980s, technology that was ahead of its time, could be embedded in a simple dime and then lost to history, only to resurface decades later as some of the most valuable small objects on Earth. And that story resonates with people who understand that value isn't always obvious, that treasures don't always look like treasures, that sometimes the most extraordinary things are hiding in the most ordinary places. The $80 million price tag on the most recent sale has sparked debates about the nature of value itself, about what makes something worth such an astronomical sum, whether it's the rarity, the technology, the story, or some combination of all three. But for the collectors who pursue these coins, the answer is simple: they're worth whatever someone is willing to pay. And as long as there are people who dream of owning a piece of secret history, who want to hold in their hands a coin that wasn't supposed to exist, who understand that some treasures are priceless regardless of their size, these 1989 D experimental dimes will continue to command prices that make headlines and inspire wonder. So as we come to the end of this incredible journey through 3 of the most valuable Roosevelt dimes ever created, I want you to think about your own coins, about the change in your pockets, about the jars and drawers and collections you might have stored away. Because somewhere out there, maybe closer than you think, there could be one of these extraordinary treasures waiting to be discovered, waiting to change someone's life, waiting to prove that fairy tales can come true and that magic still exists in the modern world, hiding in plain sight in the form of a simple 10-cent coin that holds the power to rewrite your entire financial future. And isn't that possibility, that chance, that dream worth checking your coins for, worth paying attention to, worth believing in? The hunt continues. The treasures are still out there, and maybe, just maybe, the next person to find an $80 million dime could be you.